Hi, everybody. Okay, we're continuing along in the KUZARI on page 270, and we're talking about the behavior of a pious person or the saintly person. The saintly person is in complete control of his body and his thoughts, and that's where we left off last time when we talked about movement during prayer. We had an interlude where we talked about the purpose of fasting last week because it was a fast day, and now we're going back to where we were in the text, which is on page 270, 3.5.8, subparagraph 8, where he talks about prayer, not so much with the bodily movement of prayer, which we alluded to last time, but actually how the saintly person is able to align all of his thoughts to his speech, so that a saintly person never finds himself prattling and rambling on in any aspect of life, especially not when he's speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So let's take a look at what he says. The saintly person's tongue is in accord with his thoughts. He does not say more than he is thinking. And this is really, as we'll see, in reference specifically to prayer. But the reality is that it also needs to be said in regard to any time he communicates. There are some people who are very thrifty in the way that they speak, and some people who are overly generous in the way that they communicate. And the pious person is extremely moderate. He communicates what's exactly the words that he thinks that will convey the message that he needs to convey, no more and no less. He does not recite his prayers by rote, unthinkingly, like a mina or a parrot. Rather, each word is accompanied by a proper thought and intent. The segment of time which he devotes to prayer is to him the most excellent and choicest of times. He views all other moments of his life as pathways leading to this moment. He anticipates this moment's arrival, for during it he resembles spiritual beings and is divested of the physical. Imagine being excited and looking forward to the times of davening in your life. That's the pious individual. He sees that over the course of his lifetime, he perforce has to engage in certain mundane physical activities. But he can't wait to divest himself of those prosaic responsibilities. He looks forward to the times when he can stand in prayer before God and turn off the entire outside world and just be in a relationship with Hashem and keep the complete world outside of himself. Isn't that a wonderful level to which we can all aspire? To be able to say, the moment of tefillah, that 15 minutes or half an hour that I have during the day, is my island in time, that I can turn off everything in the outside world. You know, especially in our world today, when we're bombarded with sounds. That's why I have to tell you, I've worked a lot on myself over the years, but I still find myself getting quite irate when people's cell phones go off in the middle of davening in the minyan. And no, I don't mind now. I mean, it should be turned off during shir, but that's for another reason, because it'll break the trend of consciousness. It'll break people's concentration. But during tefillah especially, and I know that you ladies don't generally go to minyan during the week. No reason why not, by the way. Remember we learned about Rebbetzin Falk in the 18th century? That was that the author of the Drisha made reference to in his introduction to his Shulchan Aruch commentary. He said, my mother was the first one in shul every single morning. In any event, there's no reason why women should not go to minyan during the week. There's absolutely, in other words, daily prayer, B'tzibor, is not obligatory upon women, but it doesn't mean that you can't go. There's no reason not to go if you'd like to be able to answer to Kaddish and Kedusha and to have an elevated aspect to the prayer. The problem is that some synagogues do not make adequate accommodations for women during the week. So I've heard from some women that they don't feel welcome to come to shul during the week. Well, you can comment on that or stay silent if you wish. But what makes me upset is when someone's cell phone goes off during davening, because especially in the middle of Shmona Esrei, there are so few times that I have to be by myself with Hashem. And someone came in and just intruded on that moment by making unnecessary noise, by allowing their cell phone to ring or go off or ping, and out of, in these people's defense, a lot of people have these kinds of cell phones that they'll make a little ping whenever an email or WhatsApp comes in. And so they're impervious to that sound. They don't even hear it because they're so used to it going off. But everyone else hears it. And so in communal settings, there are very few communal settings where we try to respect everyone else's space. No, that's okay. And so the minyan is a place where we have to remember a certain kind of etiquette, that we should turn off anything that makes noise that comes out of our body, whether it's in our pocket or elsewhere, right? We have to turn off all noise-making devices on our person when we're in shul and when we're in communal settings, where people are really trying to have some kind of very personal interface while still remaining part of the community. I mean, when you think about it, prayer is such an unusual kind of combination between a communal setting and allowing the individual to interface with Hashem on a very personal level. And so it's a beautiful combination when it works, when people are responding in unison, but then also there's the silent Shmona Esrei. But the pious person looks forward to that time of the day, yearns for that time, and says, I can't wait to put the world behind me. And it's almost like, it's like what people describe when they're in the midst of meditation, is that they can block out the outside world and use that moment as a time of inserting themselves into a special space of sanctity between themselves and Hashem. So what's not to be excited about? So the pious person views that every moment of prayer is precious. And instead of just mouthing the words like a mina or a parrot, like Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says, he focuses on the meaning of each and every word. There are many Sfarim that are written on how a person can better attenuate their kavana, their intent during prayer. There's a very special sefer called Yesod V'Shoresh HaAvodah, which was written, I think, in the 18th, I want to say 18th or 19th century, I don't recall, but is devoted to helping a person focus his tefillah. It's one of the primary foci of that particular sefer. And many Sfarim are written as to help with devices. How can I have more kavanah? But the truth is that all you have to do, it's a very simple recipe for focusing your attention. Have a siddur that works for you. Have a siddur that works for you, and not all siddurs work for every person. And it's worth actually going to a Judaica store and asking the person, may I see your selection of siddurim? And try out a few different kinds until you find the siddur that you feel works for you. And not only that, but you should also, just like you have different articles of clothing that you wear for different occasions, it's worthwhile to switch up siddurim every once in a while so that the words don't become stale on the page. When I was in yeshiva, when I first left high school, I didn't know that much Hebrew. I was probably no different from any other high school graduate who went through 12 years of day school education and came out with a paltry, substandard knowledge of the Hebrew language. which is another discussion, okay? But I made it a point, and I actually remember one good high school instructor who drilled into us Shorashim and Binyanim. So that was really a good foundation. I lament the fact that I don't think some of my children even had one good teacher that drove into my children the English language, the Hebrew language. But I made it a point because my Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Moshe Chait of blessed memory, told us that when he was a child, he taught himself Hebrew through buying himself a linear siddur. A linear siddur, which, and he said even when he was a kid, back in the early 20th century, there was something called the McGill Siddur. And it was the first, I think it was published in 1911. It was the earliest linear English Hebrew translation. And he said, it's still in print, you can still find it. And I actually went, in Yerushalayim, it wasn't that easy to find, but I finally found a copy from the Jewish Publishing Company. You remember the old Jewish Publishing Company in New York? They still had them in print. And so I bought myself one of those linear sidders, and that's how I taught myself both Hebrew and to have kavanah during davening. Now, that's many, many years ago. And I have to confess that sometimes I yearn for those days of old when I was really excited about learning every single word of davening. But sometimes I think back to those days of that old linear siddur. Today, we've become much more advanced in our publishing with Art Scroll and Feldheim and so many other really good Koren, so many really good publishers, that certainly a linear siddur is something that you should consider if you don't know all the words of the prayers already. And even if you do know all the words of the prayer, it's good to review by having the English right in front of you on a phrase-by-phrase basis so that the prayers can mean more. Now, of course, you'll tell me, but I only have 20 minutes a day to daven. If I was going to go through the tefillah on a phrase-by-phrase basis and try to understand every word, take me 2 hours a day to daven. So the response to that is, tafasta meruba lo tafasta. If you try to grab too much, you'll end up with nothing. That's the phrase from the Gemara. But the answer to that is not to try at all. The answer to that is to then take a paragraph a day that you're going to specifically focus on and use. This will be today's paragraph, which I'm going to focus all of my energy on. I'm going to spend a few extra minutes on that prayer or on that paragraph of prayer. And then I'll do this on a cyclical basis. I'll rotate the different prayers that I choose to focus on. So over the course of time, I'll develop a repertoire of prayer that I'm very familiar with and that has much more meaning for me. Elaine, what did you want to say?
I use the Koran Siddur. I don't know what to find literally. It's like it has the English on one side and the Hebrew on the other side. It kind of lines up. I find that a very good Siddur.
Good.
I also want to say for anyone, I've been coming to the 8:30 Minyan every morning, and there at least one other woman there. So if you want to come for a Minyan, you won't be the only woman there. The Minyanim in the Turk-based Midrash is much easier. The one in the Gruda is not very women-friendly.
It's not user-friendly for women. I agree to that. It's not user-friendly to anybody, to be honest, but it's even less user-friendly for women. Okay, yes, Patricia.
I also use the Koran, and what I found very helpful in the Koran is the introduction. He writes about the meanings of the different prayers and the structure of the davening.
Is that Rabbi Sachs?
Rabbi Sachs.
Yeah.
And the patterns of prayers, whether you're starting from the world outside and coming into a more personal prayer, or some of the prayers start personally and work out to looking outside. The whole structure of the various of the davening. And again, I can't go through the whole introduction every morning. So, I don't know how many pages.
That's good to review periodically.
But it's in very easy to read sections.
Mm-hmm.
And so focusing on, as you said, one paragraph or one tefillah at a time.
Very good.
That works.
Excellent. Yeah. So in that vein, I thought I would present to you really what's codified in Shulchan Aruch as far as keeping in line with this idea of kavanah, of thinking about the words that you're saying. And then I'll share with you a very short article that I wrote for Jewish Action that I think is coming out before the Yom Tovim that I have below that. But the Rav Yechiel Epstein wrote something called the Aruch HaShulchan, which is sort of a paraphrasing of the Shulchan Aruch, where he adds his own subtle commentary in between the lines of the Shulchan Aruch, which is what I have here for you. But it's basically the text of the Shulchan Aruch just enhanced just a little bit. And it says as follows. This is from Siman Tzadi Ches in Shulchan Aruch, in Orach Chaim Shulchan Aruch. He says, Tzarech la'achin machshevet libo litfilah. A person has to prepare their thoughts in order to enter into prayer. Kidichtiv, as it says in the Tehillim, tachin libam takshiv oznecha. That first the heart needs to be prepared before you can focus what your ears are going to hear from your mouth. Sheyichavein pirush hamilot mashemotzi bisfatav. And that tells me that a person has to think about the words that you're going to be producing with your lips. Diachshov, ki'ilu shchina kenegdo. A person should imagine, when he's about to engage in prayer, that the divine presence is right in front of that person. V'yasir kol hamachshavot hatordot oto, and it is necessary to try and clear your mind from all distractions before you begin. Ad shetishaer machshavto zaka v'kavanato birura b'tfilato, until your mind is clear, so that you can have clarity of thought when you pray. So the preparation of prayer really is a precursor to the exercise of prayer. That means that a person should take a moment or two to just close their eyes and clear their mind before beginning to pray. I know I got a lot on my plate today. I know I got a calendar full of activity. I'm going to put that all aside, clear my mind, and now let me launch into prayer. V'yachshov bilibo, ilu hayat tzarich l'sader devarav lifnei melech basar v'adam. Person should think to themselves, if I had to make a presentation, an oral presentation before a mortal king, kama haya misader devarav u'mechavein yafeh yafeh. Imagine how much I would rehearse this and really make sure that I was present in the moment so that I could recite this very carefully and precisely. Leviltihi kashel bidvarav, to make sure that I don't stumble in my words and say something incorrect. V'haya meisir ba'al korcho kol machshavot acherot shelo yachshov bahem klal. And if I was really focused in the moment in front of a king, I would remove any kinds of distractions, and I wouldn't be thinking about them at all. You know what I think of? Do you ever see a TED Talk? You ever watch a TED Talk?
Yeah.
Okay. So the people who get up and give a TED Talk, they speak for about 10, 15 minutes, right? They are so well rehearsed. By the time they get up to speak, there's no ums and thinking about what I'm going to say, because they know that this video is going to be circulating to millions of people on the internet, and I've got to make sure that I get every single word right, and I'm in the moment, not thinking about something that I may have left on the stove while I'm giving my talk. So that's something, that would be, I think, a good analogy, not only because we don't stand before kings regularly, but we can relate to people who have to give public presentations like a TED Talk and really think about ourselves. If I had to give a TED Talk, I would have to be so much in that moment, really focused intensely on the words that are coming out of my mouth so that I don't blow it. And that's really what the Shulchan Aruch is saying. Kol shekein ba'amdo lifnei melech malchei hamelachim hakadosh baruch hu. So surely, if I'm standing before the King of Kings, the Creator of everything, shehu choker kol hamachshavos, v'hu choker leivu bochin klayos. That's certainly true, and certainly because not only is God watching your TED Talk, but God knows exactly what you're thinking while you're giving your presentation, because God knows what's in the hearts of all men. V'kach hayu osim chasidim v'anshe ma'aseh. And so therefore, great men of earlier generations used to do the following in order to prepare themselves for prayer. Shahayu misbodadim u'miskavdim b'tfilasam. They would sit in meditation, align their thoughts. Ad shahayu magiyim lihit pashtut hagashmiut u'lihit gabrut koach hasichli. Listen to this language. He says they meditated until they reached a level of physical divestiture. They were able to divest themselves of their physical selves, remove themselves, so to speak, from their bodies, from their physicality, and to have a complete control over their intellectual faculties. Ad shahayu krovim lema'alas hanevuah, until they reached a level that was close to prophecy. Va'achshav ba'avonotenu harabim halavai shenechavein perush hamilot ulhishtabech lifnei yotzreinu b'tfilatenu. But nowadays, because we are so diminished in our capacities and in our performance, halavai, he says, that we should at least know what the words mean and think about the words when we say them, and just offer those words and to pour out ourselves before God when we pray. So we know that we can't reach that kind of sublime level today, but halavai, that we should at least know what the words mean when we say them. The reason why I think we have such difficulty with prayer, there are a number of reasons. Number one, we have very few role models for good prayer in today's world. And part of that is the rabbi's fault. I admit it. I'm not a paragon of prayer. I try my best to daven, but we need more role models of people who really daven. But not just model the physical trappings of davening, but really model davening. Another thing is that it's impossible to model davening properly, because no one really knows what's inside a person's heart. So the modeling really has to be that we have to remind ourselves of what this paragraph says and really just try our best. Each person, each individual has to try their best to find the sitter that will allow me to focus on the words and really know what I'm saying. And to at least aspire when we read a paragraph like this in the KUZARI and say, wow, halavai, that I should get to the level where I'm looking forward. It's one of the best times of the day is when I could focus on my prayers and go to minyan. And that's what the next paragraph in the KUZARI says. The cream of his day and night are thus the three times of prayer. And the cream of his week is the Shabbos, for it has been established as a time for attaching oneself to the divinity. That's where it's just paragraph 9. He says, there are 3 times a day that I look forward to most. Those are the times of Shacharis, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. The best day of the week that I look forward to is Shabbos. Not because I get to stop working, or I get to relax and read a good book, but rather because it's the time where I can conjoin with the divine presence. And as already explained, he carries out his divine service with joy, such as his service on the Shabbos, not with lowliness. We actually just saw that paragraph last week in the second essay. We reviewed that idea where Rabbi Yehuda Halevi believes that you can accomplish more on Shabbos than on fast days. Fast days are fine if they're done sparsely and periodically, but Shabbos should come every week because you can accomplish more when you're in a state of joy connecting with God than when you're in a state of misery and wretchedness. So the only add-on that I just wanted to offer, we talked about this when we focused on prayer in the second essay, but it's worth reviewing. I'm not going to go through the whole text of this little short essay. The OU's magazine had asked me to submit something of 500 words or less on prayer and to answer a couple of questions in the course of that prayer. So one of the points that I wanted to make in that essay was that one of the reasons why we don't pray as well as we should is because there's a certain ambiguity in our own minds about prayer. We know that there's a component of prayer that requires us to have kavanah. But sometimes we see that prayer means more than just heartfelt words of expressing ourselves to Hashem. When a group of people gather together to recite Tehillim for a chola, for a sick person, everyone is given a paragraph of Tehillim, right? Invariably, I'm sure at one time in your life you've been asked to participate in a Tehillim group. Yeah? When was the last time the leader of the Tehillim group said, now ladies, it's very important that when you recite the Tehillim, you are concentrating on the meaning of every single word. And therefore, we are giving you a linear translation of the paragraph that you are to say, because we want you to know exactly what every word that King David was saying when he said those words. That doesn't happen often, does it? Never. No. So why?
No, but people use Tehillim that have the English translation there, so whoever, like if you see words you don't understand, there's the English right there, either on the other side or
But they go through the
sometimes linearly.
Tehillim so fast, I don't even know how they do it. Like book after book, they're just mumbling
No,
the words.
some people go faster and some people go slower.
No, but I don't think you can really focus on saying it when it goes so fast.
I would submit,
If you're
Nanette.
saying it for yourself, then you're doing it at the speed that works for you. No?
Right, that's true. But I would submit that most people, when they are called upon to recite Tehillim, or they voluntarily recite Tehillim, are not focusing as much on the meaning of the words, but rather they feel that there's a certain value, because I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for most people the idea of reciting a paragraph Tehillim is somehow these words are going to go up to Shemayim, and they're going to connect with God. God's going to hear those words, and he's going to say, these words are being said so that so-and-so should have a refuah shalema. Maybe I'll take that into consideration in my decision as to whether to heal that person or not. Am I being overly simplistic? Or is there, the way I just described it, does that resonate with you or not?
Yes.
Or would you care to differ? I don't mean to force this interpretation upon you, but that's always the way that I understood it. I'm saying a parak Tehillim, or we're saying it communally, a parak Tehillim, so that the words will go up to Hashem. He'll hear us saying Tehillim, and he'll say, maybe in the zuchus of those Tehillim, I'll have a little bit more rachmanis on that person for whom they're davening. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, and how does it
But
really?
Do you have a buy-in? Do we get a buy-in from you?
Yeah, okay.
Rabbi, by the
Yeah.
way, on
Yes.
Sundays,
Yes.
morning 9:30, 10 o'clock, 9:30, right, we start to have Tehillim. And seriously, you have to see Rabbi Eisenberg, how the way that she read the Tehillim. You're really inspired. Last time she was seriously like crying, and when she was saying the Tehillim, she was like looking like this, like so inspiring. If you can come and help us, because we really need it. But it's very inspiring to see.
It is very inspiring to
It's
see a
very
person
inspiring to
immersed
see a
in that
person
kind
how-
of prayer.
how she-
Is very inspiring. Yeah. Yes.
Well, why do you not consider it avodah shebelev if the people saying Tehillim are concentrating on the person who's sick and thinking about her and her merit and why she deserves a speedy recovery, even if they're not understanding the exact words that they're saying, they're focusing on the person that they're davening for.
Because that's typically not what avodah shebalev is. Because if I ask you to say words, I ask you to read a play from Romeo and Juliet, right? You're going to play Juliet in the play. And I want you to think about a sick person while you're reciting those words, okay? Now, I don't even remember the lines from Romeo and Juliet, but imagine you're playing a love scene with Romeo, and you need to express your love for Romeo while you're thinking about the person who's ill that you wish to have a refuah shalema. Are those words going to be expressed in a heartfelt way towards the person?
But those words are not in sync with your intentions. When you say, Romeo, Romeo, where art thou, or whatever, those are not in sync with what you're thinking.
And
But
that's
the
the
words of
Tehillim.
Tehillim are in sync
No,
with
they
what
are
you're
not.
thinking.
And that's the point I'm making. They are not in sync. Pull out any paragraph of Tehillim, and you will see that they have nothing to do with providing a refuah shalema. They may say some of the Tehillim, say, Mimamakim kirosicha Hashem, I call you out from the depths. But you can't just think about, I call you out from the depths. King David had very profound thoughts. And every pasuk was a different thought. And they're not all aligned with asking God for a Yeshua. And certainly not asking God for a Yeshua for sickness. And so there is an aspect of avodah shebelev because you're engaged and you know that you're sitting before God and hoping that your words will meet their mark. But that's not the avodah shebelev that the Rambam was referring to.
Are
certainly.
you saying that if women get together and they would be saying A, B, C, D, E, the alphabet, and concentrating that this person have a refuah shalema, that's the same thing as if they say Tehillim and not understand it?
Never suggested that for a moment. What I am suggesting, and as you'll read when you read this little essay, is that we do believe that there is incantational value to the words of Tehillim. And what I mean by that is that David HaMelech wrote those words with Ruach HaKodesh. And because he had a certain knowledge of how to connect words together to have a spiritual resonance, of a frequency, if you will, then our repeating those words can have a supernatural effect. But it works on an incantational level, not on a conscious level. On a theurgic level, not on a conscious level. We're not taking the words of Tehillim, thinking about what they mean in order to express the ideas that are contained within Tehillim as a way of offering a refuah shalema. We're trying to affect the natural order by using words that are supernatural, by using some kind of supernatural effect that the Tehillim have. That's really, really what we're doing. And I'm not critical of that. I'm just putting out there that that is an alternate modality of prayer that is not being described in the texts that we're reading. It's not the modality of prayer that is advocated by the Shulchan Aruch, because you need to understand something. The Shulchan Aruch is talking about davening the Amidah, the Shmona Esrei. But when we recite Tehillim, we're reciting prayer in a different modality of prayer entirely. That's the only contention that I'm making. It's a different power, it's a different way of connecting, but it's not the avodah shebelev that the Rambam or the Shulchan Aruch or that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is talking about. Yes?
This difficulty in concentration is universal, and our minds are like, they say our minds are like wild elephants with millions of neuronal connections, and it's so difficult to rein in the wild elephant of our mind to be able to focus, which is what happens in prayer, mindfulness, meditation.
I know you and your husband had given a course a few years back on how to have more mindfulness when you're in the midst of prayer. So that's exactly the challenge. The challenge is that the mind is, what was your metaphor? It was like
For wild elephants.
It's like wild elephants, right?
Millions of neurons in the brain.
Neurons, right. I was going to say it's like a sieve, trying to pour something in a sieve. It's very hard to contain things there. Go ahead, follow up.
I always thought that the women getting together to say Tehillim, a big part of that was the fact that people are getting together to help somebody else, and that itself is a big zuchus for the person.
Tremendously virtuous, yes. I totally agree. But I still feel that there's a difference between them saying A, B, C, D and saying Kapitel Achav Tehillim. There's a certain supernatural frequency that exists within David HaMelech's words. The Ramchal talks about that in Derech Hashem. The fact that we've gathered for prayer is in itself going to create a benefit for the Chola, is what we believe as well. Couple that with the fact that we're using words, holy words, to express our desire for that person only adds and enhances the benefit of our gathering together. So we don't disagree 100%. My only point is this: we sometimes get confused about davening because we are cognizant of two different kinds of prayer. One kind of prayer is what I call incantational prayer. But it's not the way that we're meant to pray when we're davening Shmona Esrei. When we're davening Shmona Esrei, really the halacha requires us to focus on the words and know what they mean. It's it's not even adequate, according to the Psak Halacha, to say, well, I know that I'm standing before God. So that in itself is the fulfillment of prayer, because I've gathered in a shul to say words of prayer before God. That's great. That's a tremendous thing. As a matter of fact, the Rashba says that that's one aspect of the fulfillment of prayer. But if one really wishes to fulfill the proper mitzvah of tefillah, as it's described here and in Shulchan Aruch, you have to really know the meaning of the words. Yes?
So with Tehillim, let's just for a minute go back to that. We are still supposed to understand the meaning of them as we recite them, correct?
I did not say that. I did not say that. However, I would suggest
Like
as
the
follows. I would suggest as follows. There is incantational value to have some kind of metaphysical benefit in the prayers when you say Tehillim, even when you don't understand them. You can get an additional benefit, which is both to the person who's saying the words and to the objective of that prayer, which might be the sick person or the parnasa that you're looking for, whatever it is, if you understand the meaning of the words. That certainly it is better to understand the meaning of the words than to not understand them. But there is still benefit in reciting Tehillim even when you don't understand.
So they recite Tehillim not only for sick people, but let's say when there's, catastrophes and things like that. So is the benefit of it the mere fact that it has that spiritual value, that it's being done? Or when you're doing it, are you supposed to have in mind that specific purpose? Or is it just the benefit of, it's sort of like it has that, what you said, that spiritual relevance, and that in itself will have an effect on the outcome you desire? Or what I mean is, are you supposed to sort of direct it?
You are supposed to direct it. You're supposed to say to yourself, I'm reciting Tehillim for this Le'ilui Nishma someone, or Le'zechut Refuah Shalema of someone. I want these words to be collected in heaven in the merit of that purpose or that person. That you are supposed to direct it, yeah. Okay, so the only other thing that I will say is that sometimes we get confused. Number one, we don't say Shmona Esrei. We say Shmona Esrei like we're saying a parak of Tehillim. And that's a mistake. That's a mistake. And the other thing is that there are certain prayers where there's no incantational value whatsoever. The one example that comes to mind is the kinos that we say on Tisha B'Av. When I was growing up, there was a kinos booklet that was all in Hebrew. And we had the men, I guess the older men from my perspective, they would daven through the kinos. It would take them an hour and a half from beginning to end of service, and then there was Tisha B'Av, morning was done. And that was the extent of Tisha B'Av for us. In more recent years, to their credit, many congregations have a full morning of kinos. And what they do is that they, instead of going through, let's say there's a total of about 40 kinos that you say on the morning of Tisha B'Av, instead of going through all 40 and just davening through them, or maybe 35, will take 10 perhaps, explain them, and give people more time to focus on the meaning of the words. Because the kinos were composed by people who were not prophets, they were not composed by King David. Many of them were composed by Rabbi Elazar HaKalir, who was a medievalist. Some of them were composed by other authors, but they were not composed by prophets. And therefore, I hope I'm not being heretical by suggesting that there is no inherent incantational value to reciting a paragraph of keynote without understanding what it means. Just davening it up without understanding that the words, let's say one kina could be talking about the burning of cartloads and cartloads of the Talmud, which was a specific event that happened, which is why one of the reasons we mourn on Tisha B'Av. Another paragraph could be talking about something that happened in the times of the destruction of the first temple. Another kina would be talking about pining for the land of Israel, which is now in a state of disrepair. Another kina, could be talking about the death of King Josiah, King Yoshio, and the terrible events that led up to his demise. All of these things deserve our attention, but to say them mindlessly, just by saying the words, I fail to see value in that whatsoever. I fail to see the incantational value. I fail to see the value of saying them without realizing what the story is that they're trying to communicate. And I would say that the same thing is true for most of the slichas as well. And really, I'm not primarily addressing the ladies in the room. It's really an issue that men have. If there was ever a time when you really need to have a translation of the words, and there's more value in saying the words in English than there is in Hebrew, it would be during those portions of prayer that were not written by David, that were written by people that were not even in the times of the Talmud, but were in the medieval period. And therefore, their words are communicating a story, a theme, and are not prophetic in and of themselves. It's just something to keep in mind. Okay. Oh dear. Let's go on. We'll continue.